People do not necessarily like being called sheep. None of us want to be like a sheep led to the slaughter table. And we don't, in our modern culture, don't have a lot of interaction with sheep because most of us do not wear wool. Most of us do not know how to create lotions or soaps from lanolin, from the oils that sheep have in the wool. And lamb is definitely not the cheapest meat at the grocery store. So when we hear that Jesus is the Good Shepherd, it is not always comforting unless we hear it alongside Psalm 23, which reminds us that a shepherd guides us and takes care of us, even during the toughest of times. Today we see others shifting from the role of a sheep into a shepherd, showing mercy to others in the way that Jesus has shown mercy. Shepherds show us how to love and how serving can affect others, growing beyond the bare minimum to being an active participant. Tabitha was a leader in the local Joppa Christian community. The early church was committed to women as leaders. In a society at this time, this also meant that women had someone they could depend upon besides their children or their spouse. I like to think of Tabitha as one of the saints next door that shows what ordinary charity and kindness can do. And it seems to me that there's a deep sense of community that's modeled here in this community in Joppa. As the assembled, this group of people following Jesus in the way of Jesus are also being formed into the communion of saints in this life and in the next. And these acts that we hear about of quiet servant leadership are present today in places where we feel safe and supported. And I have to say, there's a special shout out to the people here in this place who welcome people with acts of hospitality and acts of service and generously sharing their gifts of time and presence with the people that they see in their daily lives. And Tabitha is an active participant in her own vocation and in her own way that extends beyond her calling as a leader in the church. She uses her talents to listen and shares garments and goods with others, as we find out. Though the text refers to them as widows, we would probably see them as those maybe on very limited incomes or those with no status, because widows in that time period were often destitute because of the way that the society functioned. But by the time that Peter gets there, these same women have washed the body as a final act of love and dignity for Tabitha. The Joppa community has been struck with loss and grief, and they are supporting one another. Now, trying to get to Joppa, which is along the Mediterranean coast, is also a tricky point in this story, because two messengers travel about 8 miles one way to Lydda, where Peter is staying, and then they have to find Peter in this community, and then they have to return back to Joppa. And all of this has to be accomplished within 24 hours because that is the deadline for burial in the Jewish tradition. And the mourners are there. They've already assembled when Peter arrives. And they also need to be ministered to because of their grief that they have. And just imagine, think about the scene. Imagine the joy and the relief of the community when Tabitha walks out. It is a celebration. It is a miracle. It is a witness to the power of Jesus. The Easter mystery of death and of resurrection and of renewed life is found in the restoration of life to Tabitha. We do not exactly know what happened, and that's okay, because the miracle is not about how it occurs, it is about why it matters. Why the miracle matters. And it matters because Peter shows us that prayer is a great healer. It is a connection between each one of us and God. It matters because a community is reconciled and restored. Healing can affect us mentally as well as physically, and this healing does both. It matters because it mirrors the action of Jesus in the Gospels, where he prays at the bedside of a little girl who has died. Peter is now cemented as a leader of the early church. And because he is at Joppa, that news is shipped out with the traders that pass through the seaport there. This entire narrative of Tabitha is a tale of the tension between the competing forces of the time. The forces of, in that culture, of ritual purity, of dignity, and of people over power. Peter did something scandalous by coming into a group of mostly women who he was not related to. And then, besides that, he walked into a room with a dead body. And after this, he stays with a tanner who is impure simply because of his profession. Peter has changed. Paul, whose conversion story takes up the first half of this chapter in Acts, in which we heard last week, represents the old ways are beginning to change. Peter's actions here cement the idea that the ritual laws of the Pharisees and the religious elites are secondary to the needs of the people. Just like Jesus taught, the needs of the people are more important. So that brings us to today. This city, this state, this country, this world. Within the story of Tabitha, we are called to live out our own baptismal covenant. In it, we are called to minister to others with compassion and minister to them with grace. That means listening to stories and calling people together, rather than hitting them with some Bible verse and telling them that they are not enough. We are asked to step into our own role as a shepherd to others, leading with a calm voice, even in times of trouble. And may you stay resolute, like Tabitha and like Peter, in your conviction that all people are worthy, and that your own vocation, whatever it may be, makes a difference in their lives as well as your own. That is what our own shepherd, Jesus, does for us, even in times of trouble. So even though you may be a sheep, look to try to be a shepherd too. Look to others and help them when you can. And be there and rely on Jesus to help lead you and lead others in the way. And maybe, just maybe, you can matter to someone else in their journey. Amen.